Stockfish and Leela had the most brilliant chess game yet to come, Leela, as white, with 3,950 rating, being amongst the top chess engines in the world. And Stockfish, as black, the world's strongest chess engine, with 4,050 rating, which is impressively staggering. In today's game, Leela obliterated Stockfish with 9 brilliant moves and 99.4% accuracy. This game is fully worth a watch, and it will teach you some devastating tactics for you to use in your chess games. And without further ado, let's get into it. The opening was the English opening, 4 knights, Nimzowitsch variation. And that looks like c4, e5, knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, knight c6 and pawn e4. Stockfish played bishop b4, attacking the knight, aiming to take it and damage Leela's pawn structure. But Leela doesn't mind and plays d3, defending the c and e4 pawn, so when the bishop takes c3, and when the pawn recaptures, the knight on f6 won't take the e4 pawn for free. In chess, you have always got to think more than one step ahead. If you don't, you are limiting yourself to poor play. Once you expand your thought processes, you will immediately get better. Anyways, Stockfish plays d6, defending the e5 pawn and opening a site for the bishop on c8, ready to develop it. Leela plays a 3, threatening the bishop, which leaves Stockfish with a choice, to take the knight or retreat the bishop. Stockfish decided to take the knight, and Leela swiftly recaptured. Stockfish castle, getting their king to safety, and Leela plays g3, preparing to fianchetto the bishop on f1 to Jew, also preparing to castle and continue their plans. Stockfish responded with knight to d7, rerouting it so it can come to the queen side for an attack later. Leela played knight to h4, advancing on the king side. Stockfish played knight to a5, securing a really safe place for the knight. Leela fianchetted the bishop on g2 and Stockfish played knight to c5, preparing to make a stance on the queen side for a deadly attack. Leela played rook b1, stopping the knight assembling on b3, where they could cause havoc and invade white's position. Stockfish played f6, creating a pyramid structure of pawns, where it is really tough to infiltrate, if adequately defended, which will prove a challenge to overcome for Leela. Leela castles kingside, the same side the Stockfish, who plays bishop d7, which now has a long scope on both sides of the board. f4 is played by Leela, starting the ravenous attack, with the rook on f1, the bishop on c1 and the pawn on g3 supporting the pawn. It is not wise for Stockfish to take the f5 pawn. Regarding that advice, Stockfish plays a 6, getting ready for a b5 pawn push, which will happen sooner or later. Leela plays bishop to e3, challenging the knight on c5. But Stockfish doesn't want to trade the knight for the bishop and plays knight to a4, burying deeper into Leela's position. Leela plays queen to d2, creating a battery which passively points to Stockfish's kingside, but is currently being blocked by the f-pawn. But Leela has really devastating plans for Stockfish, and you are in for a treat to see what happens. Now, this is where the first bad move happens. Stockfish plays king 8, which is an inaccuracy. You see, for engines, one slight mistake is the difference for a win or a draw, so the one little slip-up Stockfish made right now will lead to a cascade of doom. This doesn't apply to you, as you and your opponent make blunders every 20 seconds, so no need for you to worry. Anyways, as I was saying before, king h is bad, because it plants the king into the corner of the board, and with Leela's attack on the way, it's not looking good for Stockfish. Leela plays f5, activating the battery with the bishop and the queen whilst pushing the f-pawn, which takes more and more space from Stockfish. Stockfish extends their queen side with pawn b5, trying to rack on Leela's weaker side, but that isn't important right now as Leela takes the b4 pawn and Stockfish takes back, and Leela plays g4, vamping up the attack, and Stockfish better defend soon, or else it gets risky. Stockfish, adamant on their queenside expansion, plays pawn c5, going gung-ho on their objective, but to Leela, Stockfish is barking up the wrong tree as white plays rook f3, aiming to put it on h3 and support an unforgiving attack on Stockfish. c4 is played by Stockfish and rook h3 by Leela. Stockfish, being indecisive, reevaluates their choices and puts their king back on g8, steering clear of the prying eyes of the deadly rook on h3, wanting a bit of the action. Leela plays d4, trying to secrete the center so no counterplay can take place, and so that Leela's attack doesn't backfire. Stockfish plays knight b3, attacking the queen, and Leela retreats the queen to e1. But now something really interesting happens. You see, at really high-level chess, blunders are something really rare, unlike in your chess games. And surprisingly, Stockfish8 made a devastating blunder by playing queen to a5, leaving the king's defense left to scraps, and Leela has a savage continuation to this blunder. In this position, Leela Chess0 plays the brilliant move, knight g6, sacrificing the knight. If you are wondering why Stockfish can't take the knight, is because, after pawn takes knight, Leela recaptures, resulting with white having a pawn on g6. Now this pawn is crucial to the sacrifice, because without it, the attack is useless. Now the follow-up is for Stockfish to play rook f7, giving up a whole rook, but it is the best move because it gives luft for the king on g8 to escape. Leela plays queen to h4, keeping the attack ongoing. Stockfish retreats their king to f8, h8. Leela plays rook a1, Leela taking the rook because white has better plans. Stockfish takes c3 with the knight, and finally the rook is taken, and the pawn is captured by the king. But Leela has more devastation up their sleeve, because in this position, Leela Chess0 plays the brilliant move. Rook takes f6 check, sacrificing the rook. The rook is taken, and the queen goes to h7, checking the king, and it is mate in 4. Stockfish's king is herded into the middle of the board and is checkmated by a pawn, which is absolutely humiliating for the top chess engine in the world. So going back to the knight sacrifice, we now know why Stockfish can't take the knight. Instead, Stockfish played the inaccuracy, knight takes c3, attacking the rook, and what seems to be a free pawn. But let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen, nothing is free in this world. Everything comes at a cost. And this is a prime example of that, because is in this position, Leela Chess0 plays the brilliant move. Rook takes h7 check, sacrificing the rook on h7, and the rook on b1 at the same time. If Stockfish takes the rook on b1, Leela activates her queen, which is out for blood, by placing it on h4. If Stockfish tries to run the king away by playing king to f7, Leela absolutely makes a mockery of Stockfish by playing the crushing move. Rook takes g7 check, sacrificing the rook again. The king takes the rook, and the king is hunted down after queen h6 check. Defended by this bishop, the king moves away again, and after queen h quake, and when the king runs away for one last time, the misery is put to an end after Leela checkmates Leela with queen to e7 checkmate. So going back to the two rook sacrifices at the same time, we now know why Stockfish can't take the rook on b1. Stockfish in this game took the rook on h7, but that's exactly what Leela wanted Stockfish to do, because in this position, Leela played the third brilliant move in a row. Knight to e7, sacrificing the rook on b1 again, as well as refusing to take the rook on f8. Why, you ask? Well, it's because Leela is threatening to play checkmate after queen h4, with the knight securing all the escape routes from behind the king, and the queen comes in for the kill. And if Leela took f8, there wouldn't be a checkmate threat, and Leela would be losing after all of those sacrifices for nothing. Now Stockfish desperately plays the really interesting move, knight e2 check, checking the king whilst discovering an attack on the queen, which is on e1. Stockfish did this because they want to trade Leela's queen for theirs, and the whole point of these sacrifices was because Leela's queen was the main point of the attack. Without the queen, Leela would be losing completely. So Leela is forced to take the knight and deflect the king off the h4 square's site, leaving the attack is postponed for a little while. Stockfish tries to get rid of the knight, which is infesting black's position, by playing rook f to e8, creating a luft for the king whilst attacking the knight on e8. But Leela has other plans of savagery for Stockfish, because in this position, Leela Chess0 plays the fourth brilliant move g5, sacrificing the knight for a pawn move. Well, we will see why that is important now. Stockfish took the knight with the rook, and Leela's queen slipped on to h5, checking the king. The king is forced to g8, and Leela hems in the position with g6, squeezing the water out of the stone in this position. Stockfish plays rook e to e8, trying to support the back rank when the queen comes in. But Leela isn't finished with the ruthless sacrifices yet, because in this position, Leela plays the brilliant move, bishop to g5, sacrificing the bishop. If Stockfish takes the bishop, it is mate in 4 as follows. Leela's queen slides to h7 defended by the pawn, forcing the king to slide to f8. f6 is played by Leela, planning to crush Leela's king where it has nowhere to go. No matter what Stockfish plays, it is inevitably checkmate after queen takes g7 checkmate. So going back to the bishop sacrifice, we now know why Stockfish can't take the bishop. Instead, Stockfish played knight to c1, essentially sacrificing the knight, but it cuts off the circulation of the rook to the king, and if the knight is not taken, the queen will slide to e1 and destroy Leela. Essentially, Leela is forced to take, and after rook takes knight, Stockfish plays queen takes a3, planning to infiltrate from the back rank, but Stockfish has bigger problems at the moment. Because in this position, Leela plays the brilliant move, the subtle rook f1, sacrificing the bishop and moving the rook to safety. Again, if the bishop is taken by Stockfish, the same checkmating idea is followed through by Leela, as after queen h7 check and f6 by Leela, it results in rook takes f6 checkmate. So going back to the bishop sacrifice after rook f1, we now know that the bishop is poisoned and Stockfish can't take it. Instead, Stockfish plays rook a7, an inaccuracy. Leela swiftly checks Stockfish with queen h7, forcing the king to go to f8. But the fun doesn't stop there, because in this position, Leela plays the brilliant move. King h1, sacrificing the bishop by moving the king to h1. Why? Because Leela is trying to reassociate their king relating to any check Stockfish may have with the queen that could cause a position to crumble. You see, in chess games you have to balance offense with defense. If you go all out, you may leave gaps in your position where the opposition could counterattack and you can lose. So sometimes, the best defense is the best offense. Just make sure that you don't get bank rank mated. Yes, you. I know you just got bank rank this morning, don't lie now. Anyways, after king h1, Stockfish played bishop to c6, getting the rook on a8 to defend the 7th rank, slightly suppressing any infiltration from Leela. Leela plays d5, attacking the bishop, and Stockfish thinks they are Leela and tries to sacrifice the bishop by playing c3. But it's not good because Leela can retreat their bishop from the sacrificial outpost and stab Stockfish from the other side. Now, as I said before, at this high level, engines never blunder at all, only if they miscalculate the position, but surprisingly, Stockfish played another magnificent blunder of rook e to a8, creating an Alekhine's gun along the a-file, completely abandoning the king's defense. But Stockfish has 2 passed pawns, and Stockfish is really trying to create some counterplay, but it just isn't working, because Leela has a really interesting move now. Because Leela plays bishop b6, a really good move which is really hard to find. As most beginners like you would happily take the rook, but that is not what Leela is trying to do. Leela is trying to make a mating net for Stockfish. For example, if Stockfish disregards Leela's mating net, playing a move like queen b3, well, it is a mate in 4 as follows. Queen h check by Leela, the king is forced to go to e7. Leela takes the g7 pawn with check, and the king is forced to run yet again, but the bishop cuts off the king, and the king is forced to go to e8. And after queen to g8, not matter what move Stockfish makes, Leela would tag team with the bishop and play queen e6, checkmate. So going back to bishop b6, we now know why this was such a good move. So Stockfish played rook f7, running out of moves, it is really being indecisive, and second, guessing its through of attack or defense. And right now it needs to defend desperately, but it is pretty futile though. Leela takes the rook, and Stockfish is using Leela's pawn as a shield, which gives Stockfish some time to buy. But unfortunately for Stockfish, it is make in 14, and the game is most definitely a loss for black. Stockfish, with no hope left, plays bishop d7, getting out of the danger, but Leela with no remorse plays queen to g8, forcing the king to go to e7. Leela takes the g7 pawn, and Stockfish desperately stops Leela from queening by playing rook f8. But Leela's rampage isn't over, because in this position, Stockfish plays the brilliant move. Bishop d8, sacrificing the bishop. The king takes the bishop, and Leela takes the last line of defense that stops the second queen from reigning, and Stockfish's king migrates to c7, trying to evade the worst to come. Leela moves their queen to e7, pinning the bishop to the king, so another, and one of the last of Stockfish's pieces is immobilized. Stockfish puts their queen on a8, stopping Leela from queening. But we now see a really funny spectacle, because in this position, Leela humiliates Stockfish by playing pawn f8, promote to a rook, insulting Stockfish at its finest. It's really cool to see engines have a sense of humor. Stockfish takes the rook with the queen, and it's at mate in 9. Leela takes the queen, and Stockfish, trying to put Leela off, starts marching their two passed pawns, hoping to create some trouble. Leela, undeterred from their objective, plays rook a1, adamant on their end goal. Stockfish plays c2, really striving for a glimmer of hope, but Leela is relentless and plays queen to e7, pinning the bishop to the king again. Stockfish plays b3, on the verge of getting some queens and overthrowing Leela, but Leela doesn't let up and plays bishop f1. A really interesting move. Even if Stockfish queens, it is using the bishop as a barrier so Stockfish can't get any tempos on Leela with queens and win. 2 is played by Stockfish with both of Stockfish's pawns one move away from turning into a queen. But in this position, Leela Chess 0 plays the brilliant move. Rook a8, letting Stockfish get a queen, but it doesn't matter which pawn Stockfish queens with. It ends up with a checkmate for white as after queen d8 check, the king is forced to go to b7. And the Leela ends Stockfish's misery once and for all by playing queen b.8, checkmate. Thank you for watching all of the video. This game was one of a kind, with insane dynamicity and sacrifices left, right, and center. With a total of 9 sacrifices played in the real game, it was a magnificent game. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope to see you in the next one. Also, the game's PGN is in the description. Thank you for watching Chesscadia. Out.